Hey, Noelle the First here. So in this video, I want to talk about synesthesia, specifically my two forms of synesthesia, which are color-grapheme synesthesia and spatial sequence synesthesia. So if that topic interests you, go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and stay tuned. So let me start off by saying that most of my life, I never thought that I had synesthesia. I, learned about synesthesia probably about 15 years ago, and I always thought it was where you tasted a sound or a certain piece of music evoked a certain color. And then it was later on that I found out about two forms of synesthesia that I actually do have. I have color-grapheme synesthesia, or I think I've heard of it as grapheme-color synesthesia, and also spatial sequence synesthesia. So color-grapheme is where you kind of automatically attach a certain color to certain letters and numbers. For instance, my 3s and 4s are always green. The letter J is always yellow. Saturday is always yellow to me, the word itself. Monday is kind of a pinkish red. Wednesday and Friday is green, and so on and so forth. And that never changes, so we'll see, ask me again in 10 years, and 10 years in my past, I think that color has always been the case. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why those specific days of the week and numbers and letters have those specific colors, but it's just a constant for me. The other form of synesthesia that I have is spatial sequence synesthesia. So for instance, when I'm picturing time, I tend to picture it in distinct decades. So right now I'm thinking about the 1970s. So I was born in 1972. So for me, the 70s are all the way sort of out there in the distance, furthest away from me, because that's when I was born. And they're yellow because the number 7 is yellow. So the 70s are all yellow, and it's almost like a large file folder is the best way I can describe it. And that's in the distance. And then if I'm actually trying to think about memories from that time, it's almost like they feel like they're kind of shuffled into that file cabinet. And then I think about the 80s. And now the 70s are kind of, I'd say, horizontal, and then the 80s almost become vertical in a way. So, the 70s I'm picturing this way, and then the 80s I'm kind of picturing more stretched out, more long-wise. And the 80s are kind of a metallic grayish blue, which to me just kind of feels like the 80s. It's also influenced by the number 8, which for me is kind of a deep kind of grayish blue. And then at each decade, the shape of how I envision it turns like at a right angle. So then we get into the 90s, and then that turns back to a more horizontal presentation, and the 90s are red and very warm because they are 9, and 9s are red. For the longest time, when that switched to the 2000s, what was really weird for me is, and kind of still is the number 2 sort of dominated the first 2 decades of the 2000s. So I've sort of been on a continuous line from the year 2000, and that's only recently started to shift, where now I kind of see, 2001, 2000 through 2010 kind of as a separate thing. And now I'm still sort of, even though this is 2019, so we're still in this decade, I see it now as, I'm sort of on the continuous, white continuous folder. I feel like I sound crazy right now, but this is how I picture it in my mind. So anyway, you get the point. Obviously, if you have this as well, it's probably going to sound familiar, but your organization or how you picture things is going to be different. Now, for the longest time, I didn't know I had synesthesia because I just kind of assumed that was how everybody's mind works, and how often are you describing how you're seeing something in time or what color J is, But as I started to have conversations with friends, and I just assumed like, oh, all visual people think this way. And then I'd talk with people and they'd be like, no. And they'd look at me like I was crazy because I'd be like, describing it in such detail as I just did. And they were like, no, I don't have that at all. So to me, it's still sort of a funny thing. I just think of it as being visual. I do not have the other forms of synesthesia. I don't know if it's called taste touch synesthesia, where I feel like certain things or sounds remind me of textures. However, I will say that when I smoke pot, which is not frequent, my synesthesia kind of goes crazy, and I have experienced that those other forms of synesthesia where I say a word and like I can feel like it gets stuck in my throat, and it has not just a color, but it has like a specific texture, you know, and metal material to it. But like I said, that's, you know, only been when I smoke pot, which, yes, is not very, or eat pot, you know, edibles. So I do find this, you know, phenomenon fascinating. I would love to know what kind of synesthesia you have, how you picture your days or colors, or if you have touch, taste, or whatever it's called, synesthesia. I would love to find out and know more about it. I will say that I'm getting back into writing, specifically teleplays and screenplay style writing. And that was something I've always been interested in. And even as a young kid, I would visualize plays and scenes. And, you know, I have to imagine that this is very common for people who script like that. You know, whether I'm actually writing something, I'm constantly scripting and sort of creating scenes and visual worlds. So it's like, well, why not play to that strength and actually, you know, go back into that and do something with it. So I think that it does help me in that medium. And even with some of these YouTube videos, just kind of envisioning, you know, what I wanted them to look like, even though I'm not doing any kind of like elaborate setups. As you can see, I'm in my guest bedroom here. It has been a small way of utilizing that kind of skill that I have, you know, or that very visual sense. And so that's been kind of a satisfying creative outlet for me. But I'd love to know more about you, if you have different kinds of synesthesia, how it's affected your life, how it hasn't. I mean, it's, you know, it's like normal, right? It's not like I'm walking around having my life disrupted by synesthesia. At least I don't think so. That's kind of an interesting idea. I mean, I know that sometimes I can really, really get stuck in a daydream, but I think that's normal, I hope. So anyway, that's that. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. I would love to have you as one of my subscribers. And thanks so much. Bye.